Great.
So Diane, I think you can start the meeting.
Excellent.
Can you hear me? Just one second. Can you hear me now? This is Eric Kulisade. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
that we can, yep.
Yes, we
Okay.
can. Okay, before we start, I'm just going to ask anybody who's not speaking to mute your phones, if you would. It makes it a lot easier for people to hear. So anyway, thank you everybody in these unusual times for joining us on this Zoom. I hope everybody's okay and surviving sheltering in place. With a quorum being present, I now call to order the March 30th, 2020 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. Due to the coronavirus pandemic and consistent with Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 202.1 issued on March 12, 2020, this meeting is being held remotely via a teleconference, enabling participation of the directors and the general public. The directors have received the agenda materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions or comment at any time on the action items submitted for approval today. Please note, however, questions or comments from the audience will not be entertained at this meeting. I note that the board memos and resolutions on today's agendas have been posted on the Trust website in the link entitled Board of Directors Message, and thus are available to the public. I also appreciate the directors agreeing to meet remotely during these difficult times, as there are several important decisions and action items that need to be completed today. There are 5 items on the consent agenda for our meeting today. The first one is the approval of minutes and ratification of the actions taken at the January 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. 2, an authorization to contract with Avalon Exterminating Company for park-wide pest inspection, monitoring, and extermination services. 3, ratification of an authorization to contract with Easy Docks Unlimited LLC for Pier 66 plastic floating dock and gangway installation and maintenance. 4, authorization to amend contract with the Pace Companies of New York, Inc. for Pier 40 fire sprinkler restoration. And 5, authorization to amend contract with Gage Meyer Engineers, PC DBA EDG for Pier 40 roof engineering consulting services. So unless anybody has any comments, I will call now for a motion to approve all of the items on the consent agenda.
So moved. Approved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, the first item before the board is a request for approval of the April 1, 2020 through March 31, 2021 fiscal year operating budget. Madeline.
Thank you. Today you'll be approving the 2021 budget. We've been working hard over the last week to revise the draft that was reviewed by our audit and finance committees on March 17th. Given the toll the health crisis is taking on the economy, we've cut our budget to reflect this new, hopefully temporary new normal. Instead of hiring new employees to manage the upcoming park expansion, we are now recommending a hiring freeze and hoping to be able to weather the storm. Given that it is unclear when the city will be open for business, we've taken a more conservative approach on our revenue, hoping that it will improve. I'd like to suggest a monthly check-in with our audit and finance committees for as long as it takes to get back to some stability. And I'll ask Julie to reach out. Whoops. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
I just lost you, so. Okay, I lost you visually. All right.
We can see you, or I can see you.
Okay,
So.
good. I'll ask Julie to reach out to the committee members to schedule. And now I'll turn this over to Dan Kurtz, our CFO, for the proposed budget presentation. Dan?
Dan, you're on mute.
Hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
So I should say, well, first off, welcome everybody, and good to see you all on the screen. I'm also on the screen in New Jersey is Sikander Zuberi, who's our Vice President of Finance, and he was instrumental in developing the FY21 budget. And if there are questions, he's going to be the answer man because he has all the backup. By way of background, and Madeline alluded to this, the proposed budget was reviewed in preliminary form by the Audit and Finance Committee in January of this year. And a copy was provided to the full board immediately thereafter. The preliminary proposed budget was placed on the trust website at the end of January, beginning of February. A companion document, the annual financing plan, which describes the sources and uses of funds for the completion of the park, was distributed to the board and put on the trust website at the beginning of February. And the financing plan, if you recall, has the capital cost by project, and it indicates basically the sources and uses of funds. The last page of the budget, which was distributed to you and which we'll get to in a minute, has the same summary chart or a similar summary chart to what's in the annual financing plan, indicating the individual new construction projects, the amount that's anticipated to be spent in FY21, and the total cost of those. I should add that given the current, I'll call it the economic crisis, I guess that's a fair word, although it's still unfolding. We don't completely know, we're not assured as to the availability of state and city capital budget monies for some of the projects. We've been notified already by the City of New York that they're instituting a freeze on non-emergency funding, non-emergency construction projects. And we expect to be in further discussion, as this, as time goes on, as to when and under what circumstances that freeze may be lifted, hopefully. The preliminary budget then, as Madeline said, was updated in early March. And we were told by the committee at that time to continue to monitor our projected revenues and see what the impact might be on the revenue and expenses. So the budget before you today actually represents a somewhat of a modification from what on 17th. The situation continues to unfold very rapidly. Before I go into the budget, just put this in context. The budget provides basically a spending framework for HRPT in the coming fiscal year. Approval of the budget by the board does not provide approval for spending for projects or for contracts which have not been brought to the board for its approval. However, when individual board items are brought to the board, we indicate how the funding is addressed, where it's addressed, and it's always by reference to the budget. So the budget is basically the framework and the reporting overarching method that we use for tracking how we're spending, where we're spending, and to try to remain on target during the year. So Exhibit 1, I don't know, can you expand this, Sikander, or can people see it? Oh, okay, a little bit better. So Exhibit 1 is sort of the key budget page, if you will. And going from left to right, just in terms of the information that's on here, it indicates the approved budget for fiscal year 2020, the one that's ending tomorrow. The projected actual expenditure during fiscal year 2020. And I should add that these are simply projections of what we believe. Our actual results are subject to annual audit, and they'll be provided to the board and the audit committee, the finance committee, and the board in June when our audited financials are produced. The next column, it says preliminary. So that was where we thought the spending was going to be in January of this year when we presented the preliminary budget and placed it on the trust website. And then proposed FY21 is where we think we are right now in terms of that column. I'll be focusing primarily on the column on the right-hand side. Again, we think these projections here are, I would say, are conservative in terms of where we see revenue being, and as maybe taken, I'll say, the scissors and snipped different expense categories to try to bring this more into balance. As you know, our objective every year is to have an operating surplus, unfunded capital maintenance costs, and that is the case again in the FY21 budget. So for FY21, we have a budgeted operating revenue of bottom number here, if you can see it in total revenue. And this is budgeted to be 4.1 million greater than our operating expenses, which are 26 million. I'm looking for the column here. Oops. Skander, can you a little bit so you see the total operating expenses? Skander, can you hear me?
Can you roll? Good.
There you go. Oop. So this is personnel expenses, and then as you go further down, just right at the bottom, 26 million. You can stop there, Skander. That's fine. So this surplus then of 4.1 million is applied to, and if you can go down just a couple of lines more, Skander. Very good. This is working like a charm. The unfunded capital maintenance of $8.4 million. So that will yield us basically operating deficit of $4.2 million. And this is what we, at this point, again, not knowing exactly what's going to in store for us in terms of the economic crisis, we're projecting currently for FY21. And the net result of this would be a reduction in the trust's reserves of $4.2 million, $4.2 million. I should
Leaving
say
us how
that
much?
on a,
Leaving us how much, Dan?
I'll get to that, Larry. So let me just finish, and then I'll get to individual questions if that's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
No problem.
Leaving us how much in the reserves?
Yep. The quick answer is 29 million, but I'll get back to that. On a
Okay.
GAAP basis, as opposed to the way that we're accounting for capital maintenance here as an expenditure in the current budget year, we're looking at an operating loss of 6 million, and this is because capital maintenance is not recognized as an expense, and depreciation is. So those results are shown towards the bottom of the sheet. On a year-over-year basis, budgeted revenue from all sources is 30.2 million. This is 10 million less than the budgeted amount in FY20, and it's 14% less than than January's preliminary. Make me dizzy, Skander. the January 21 projection. So basically, between January of 20 this year and the budget that's before you, we basically have recognized, or we believe that we're going to not receive $4.8 million. So the $4.8 million represents a reduction of revenue. And what this is a reduction from leases, occupancy permits, and concession agreements and fees of about 4%. We're expecting a sharp decline, primarily in percentage rent and percentage fees on the sales of food, beverage, and cruise tickets. We are projecting at this point parking revenue to decrease by a more modest 3%, although we were just informed this morning that our early bird special, which is parking which is largely available to construction workers in the area, dropped to its lowest level ever because a result of the construction moratorium. So the construction work, for example, across the street with the construction of the housing project and the Google project has basically stopped. Other construction area has stopped, and so our early bird parking revenue has dropped dramatically. We think our monthly parking revenue is going to hold up relatively well, however. We also are projecting a sharp increase in interest income during the year, and this has two causes. Number one, there's a declining balance in terms of what our available, the total amounts in our reserve accounts are going to be. And secondly, because of the interest rate environment, there's much lower yields on short-term investments and securities. We're also projecting a reduction in field events, field fees, event fees, and sponsorship fees. And this mirrors our expectation that most of the venues in which we hope to host or have these activities occur are going to be closed, probably at least until June. We're also looking at a reduction in contribution from Hudson River Park Friends. They had the previous budget. We're looking for $1.1 million in the next budget year, but currently we've snipped that back to $500,000. This is a reduction of $600,000 in anticipated revenue from Friends. I should say that we were also very recently been advised by Friends that the second contribution, we usually get this in two pieces as they collect money from the gala in the preceding year, is not going to be forthcoming. So the second amount of Sikander, I think it's $500,000.
550.
550, thank you. The second amount of 550, which we always get before the end of March, we're not going to get, according to Connie. So we've therefore cut back, the expected amount for next year to match that. Obviously, the ability of Friends to raise money from donors, from philanthropists, et cetera, is going to be constrained in the current economic framework. So that's revenue. It's not a terrific picture. We are, as Madeline said, we're going to try to monitor these things on a regular basis. We're in discussion with our major tenants in terms of where they are in terms of paying us. Obviously the leases we're relatively secure on. There are monthly payments, but then the payments which are dependent on percentage revenues are much less. We're much less secure, with regard to those payments. We'll be in individual discussions with those tenants to the degree there are any workouts or other agreements that we're going to enter into with the tenants. We'll be conferring with the Finance Committee on those. Let me switch then to expenses. So let's see, the first one on here, I guess, Sikander, is the payroll. So overall personnel services, including wages and fringe benefits, are projected to increase by 2% in the current year. The much larger increase shown in the preliminary proposed budget has been eliminated. Our current headcount is 83. We anticipate going to 84 in the next budget year, but that 84th person is not scheduled to start until September. And that's a horticulture staff person who we have slotted to help maintain Pier 26. We're still hoping and expecting that Pier 26 will open in August or September. So we have a half-year horticulture person scheduled and budgeted for that slot. All other new positions basically have been put on hold or eliminated. As Madeline indicated, I think originally had 9 new positions, so that's been dropped to 1. We have a freeze also on any staff salary increases. It can perhaps be reviewed towards the end of the year, but we're budgeting a 0 here. We do have a contractual obligation for a 2% increase to the employees of Local 30 of the operating engineers. We'll be in discussion with the union regarding that, but we have budgeted the contractual increase for the union employees. So between the January figure and today's operating budget, we've eliminated, or we've cut $1.7 million or 6% from the January preliminary proposed budget. In terms of the individual items, there is an increase shown here for direct park operations, budget increased by 12%. That is largely a result of the single new unfunded contract of $782,000, which is before you today, which is the consultant study for the Pier 40 seismic engineering. So there's no offsetting revenue for that study at this juncture. It's not payable out of air rights or any government sources. So this will be a matter of discussion, I guess, when we get to the individual item. But that accounts for most of the increase in park operations. It goes within the category of facility capital plan. So it's in the capital plan portion of the budget is where that appears. There's also, I should say, an increase which we're keeping, which is for the website design and website implementation, which is about, I think it's a little bit over 100,000 in the coming year. So that has not been reduced. So the combination of those two things caused the direct park operations to increase. by about 12%. Parking operations is up by 3%. Again, part of it reflects an increase in union wages for the parking workers. We have decreased our administration budget by 2%. As an overall percentage of our operating budget, administration is dropping from 27.5% to 25%. We're trying to keep our belt tight with regard to all admin costs. Utility costs that are in the budget show a sort of what appears to be at first glance an alarming 44% increase over the prior year's budget. But I should say that this represents actually only a 2% increase over the actual utility costs in the current fiscal year. And the reason for that is that going into the current fiscal year, we were not properly recording a number of water meters that were under DEP's records. And we were somewhat surprised to get a number of new bills from DEP for water accounts that we did not have current information on. So the water amount basically is increased. We have implemented a better system for monitoring water meters and to more accurately track both consumption and for billing for water. We have also engaged a consultant who's working on energy conservation and water conservation measures. We've retained through New York Power Authority. They're looking at both electric and water consumption, and we hope to be implementing some of their recommendations in the current year, in the year to come. So the overall, I get the other items in there, I'll just touch on very, very briefly. With regard to security, this is essentially the PEP contract. There's been an increase in the union rates for our New York City Parks PEP employees. So there's a small increase, modest increase with regard to the PEP employees. Sanitation, likewise, there's an increase, and that reflects primarily an increase in the prevailing wage for the FedCap workers who do the indoor cleaning. Utilities, I just talked about. Insurance has an increase. And again, that's with regard to liability. As Tom Gates knows very well, because we reviewed it with him in detail, we had a substantial increase in the umbrella portion of the liability insurance. However, this increase in liability insurance should be offset by reimbursements from the city or the state as the ongoing year in terms of state justification versus reimbursing us for the insurance costs appears is going to go on for another year. So the overall operating expenses for the park are projected at $26 million in the coming year. Again, that's a $1.7 million reduction off of January, but it is approximately a $1.8 million increase over the previous year's budget for the increased reasons that I detailed with regard to the individual cost expense. Sikander, could go to the capital maintenance budget next. Maybe just go to Exhibit 7. One more. Oh, there you are. Very good. Just scroll up a little bit. Yep. So we budgeted. So Exhibit 7 here lists the capital maintenance, which is $46.7 million, which is budgeted for the upcoming fiscal year. In addition to which we have an equipment budget of $1.3 million, and I'll go through that just very briefly. So this chart indicates the breakdown for capital maintenance for upland parks and piers at $4.5 million. And sort of the headliners here are the reconstruction of Chelsea Waterside Park. I think you've gotten some contracts. When that construction contract is ready to go, it's going to come before you. We have a good source of funds here in terms of air rights funds from the sale of Block 675 last year, which is going to fund basically virtually all of the costs for Chelsea Waterside Park in the current year. The additional costs basically for grounds are primarily for on-call capital maintenance for electric, plumbing, things like that. We anticipate doing paving work, which is an annual that we have to keep up in terms of the paving on the Esplanade. For the capital maintenance marine, which is can people see it behind Madeline's picture, or am I the only one who can't see it? Anyway, it's $2.5 million. The primary cost there is for repairs to marine structures. We also have allocated money for ongoing inspections. We've recently received notice that there may be a problem with the bulkhead in the area of the heliport. There'll be some additional investigations there. But we've been running $2 to $2.5 million a year for marine capital maintenance for the last several years. So we think this is a reasonable number. Pier 40 is, of course, the special case here. So we're projecting $38 million of capital maintenance costs for Pier 40. Virtually all of it is reimbursable through air rights fund. The headline numbers here are $19.5 million for ongoing pile repairs. Unfortunately, the pile contractor that we had working this year was unable to complete the number of assigned pile repairs, and a lot of that is going to push to next year. Next year being the year that starts in 2 days from now. If they're unable to, if the new contractors are unable to do their currently assigned work and the work that is left over from the phase 3 and 4 contractor, the people who are supposed to finish this year and didn't, it may be pushed into the following budget year. So all this money is going to be spent. It really is a matter of when it's going to be spent, and it'll be spent as soon as the contractors can be scheduled, undertaken to complete the work. The current moratorium on construction has already adversely affected our schedule. We'll see if the contractors can pick that up when they start work, hopefully, within the next several weeks or the next month or so. There's a fire protection. We have budgeted at $1.7 million. We've been bedeviled by the Pier 40 sprinkler system. We did numbers of repairs trying to renovate the existing system, and as we did the repairs, new leaks came in. So we are now, and this is an item which is before you on your board agenda, we're going to be doing substantial, some replacement of mains and other sections of the sprinkler system. Also before you today is an item for repairs to the facade of the building. We think there are a lot of very urgent repairs needed for the Pier 40 facade. And then lastly is the Pier 40 roof. I sent you earlier today a letter from the engineer, from the roofing engineer, indicating the critical nature of the western portion of the Pier 40 roof, something which we basically have been deferring now for, I'm going to say 6 years, in the hope to sort of avoid this expense, but it appears to be coming around now. So the total amount for Pier 40 capital maintenance is $38 million. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I think all but approximately $2 million is reimbursable, or we were able to access either the air rights funds or money that was received from the developer of Leroy Street diagonally across from us to offset that. Within the equipment budget of $1.3 million includes amounts for purchases of servers and software to enable us to move to the cloud this year. We're finally getting on the cloud after several years. This should allow for us to have more efficient long-term data storage, reduce the purchase of computer servers, and make more efficient use of third-party software maintenance. So we think in the long run, this will be cost-effective. But I should say that certain essential functions such as security cameras will continue to be serviced in-house. We're going to keep those servers and keep the data in-house. The other major item in the capital budget for equipment is for security cameras. And again, there's an item before you today for the next phase of security camera purchases. So that is the capital maintenance and the equipment budget for the coming year. The last item, and then I'll stop, is because I've been going on probably for too long, is the capital budget. Sikander, can you go to the last page? Oh, can you blow it up a little bit? Or? So this largely matches the last page of our annual financing plan. And again, this describes the expenditures towards the completion of the park. So as people know, it's our hope and intent to complete Pier 26 in the current year. And the amount that we're going to spend on the Pier 26 park in the current year is, looks like about 12.9 million, if I'm seeing this right. So this will enable us to complete the Pier 26 park. The source of funds there is the City of New York. We've already received the funds from the City of New York, and LMDC and Citibank. So we are still planning on completing Pier 26 in August or September. We also hope to commence construction of new park at Pier 97, primarily with funds provided by the State of New York, but also air right funds. And we also expect to start the construction of new park at Gansevoort towards the end of the year. And for this, our first source of funding may be the settlement funds, which were provided through a lawsuit that Friends initiated a number of years ago when the Department of Sanitation was slow to get off of Pier 97 in Gansevoort. So there's $23 million currently in our account to apply only for Gansevoort, and so we may use that if funds from the city are not immediately available to make sure that we maintain our construction schedule. I'll just end by saying that as discussed with the committees, our goal is always to maintain, or to generate, I should say, a modest operating surplus in the current budget year. This year will be challenging, but we think we should be successful in doing it still. The long-term structural weakness of the trust financing plan is, once again, that our capital maintenance costs are projected to exceed the operating surplus in the current year and in future years. And looking out to, as we look out 2, 3, 5 years into the future, we see that unless new sources of revenue can be identified and generated, the long-term outlook for funding park capital maintenance and operations may be compromised. And there may be hard choices if we don't have the funds to do that. So I know people are working very hard, looking at Pier 40, looking at Pier 76, looking at other potential new revenue sources. So with that, I'll stop, and maybe I should open up for questions, and then I can refer this to our chairperson of the Finance Committee, who, with the other members,
Chair of the audit.
The chair, who can give us a report, of the committee members who were involved, I guess, twice with regard to the budget in January and then again in March.
Any questions? I just want to say, Dan, thank you to you and your team, and Madeline, everybody. There's a ton of work that's gone into this budget, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? So the Finance Committee, as Dan said, has looked at this twice, most recently on March 17th, and pretty much in detail. And we are recommending that the board approve this budget. Anybody have anything to say?
Well, I would like to hear from the Finance Committee before I approve anything.
Well, the Finance Committee approved it and is recommending to the board that this budget be approved.
Larry, it's the, I just want to say we have two committees. We have an audit committee and we have a finance and investment committee. And just to keep it straight, this is before the audit committee. Diana is the chair of the audit committee. So she's speaking right now as chair of that.
I'd like to hear the committee recommendations. Even though I know they recommended it, I'd like to hear from them. Anybody, are they on the phone?
Yes. Who specifically would you like to hear from?
Jeffrey.
Well, you picked the one person who actually missed the meeting.
Right, exactly. Which is why I said that we approved it and recommended that the board, sorry about that.
John Halpern, do you want to speak?
Hi, Larry, it's John. I attended the meetings, the meeting in January, the second by phone. And as Dan and Diana reported, we did go through the budget initially in its preliminary form. And then went through the revised budget more recently after the effects of the coronavirus crisis began to become apparent. As in prior years, we reviewed the revenue side carefully and reviewed the expense side. We think the staff continues to do a really admirable job in not only performing but exceeding budget expectations. And I think the general consensus was that this year's budget is equally conservative to prior years, with the exception of the unknown that, nobody at this point knows how deep this recession is going to go. But I think that they've established, fair and reasonable placeholders given the information we have today.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Is that
Um,
normal?
The only thing that gave me pause, of course, is the same old stories, the 38 million in capital maintenance for Pier 40. We go every time, that,
Going to be a separate item, or we're going to talk about that separately?
Pam, I should
well,
just say
that's just
this,
the roof repair.
Pam, let me just say that this it includes largely, the pile repair, which is anticipated. So this is capital maintenance sort of writ large. So it includes not just fixing, plumbing systems, but also most importantly, the piles. So more than half of this are the piles. And also includes, the roof work, which you're going to vote on, which is now sort of gotten to be mission critical in terms of at least one section of the roof.
Right.
Otherwise, there's also, the items here really been selected with regard to safety. So the facade repair is focused primarily on maintaining public safety, walking around the pier. And the other item, larger item, is the sprinkler system. So these are not, if you will, discretionary purchases or discretionary capital maintenance items for Pier 40. These are sort of the things that need to be done.
So it was, oddly, I can't look at my own stuff while Sikander's screen is up, so without exiting the call, I think. So it was 12 million, oh, there we go, for the roof. And let me find it now, hold on.
So it's 12.7 million for the roof, 19.5 for the repairs, 1.7 million for the sprinkler system. At the end of the roof repair, we're going to try to reestablish the passive field on the roof. That has a number, and also there's some final completion to the final cost with regard to the courtyard field that has to be attended to in terms of netting, some striping, some lighting around the field, et cetera. So that has to be done. The only item which I would say is a little bit on the discretionary side is the completion or of the renovation of some of the HRPT offices. And that's not scheduled really to come before the board until the end of this year, end of the calendar year in December,
Yeah.
January. So we'll see where our budget is at that point and make a decision on where to go on that. But these are
Then
basically all the straight ahead items.
to make me feel a little better about the 12 million, what's the, is that in the item, how many acres we're talking about, or square feet in that corner of the roof?
It's not
Yeah, I
the
think
corner. It's
it's the entire western portion of the roof. So
the southwest portion of the roof. And
southwestern, yeah.
we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I mean,
Right.
we'll get into the details of that.
All right.
Anybody else?
I cannot express how unhappy I am to pour more money into Pier 40. I think I've been saying it for years and years ago that we should stop this,
Hey,
and it never seems to end.
Larry, so we put a moratorium on spending money except for emergency purposes on Pier 40. And we stopped 6 years ago fixing the roof. but we've had an engineer monitoring it. And this year, as you know, and we've discussed this in front of the board.
I read the letter, Madeline.
No, but probably 4 months ago, we had a big discussion at the board meeting regarding some of this. And at some point, it becomes a safety issue, and we're at that point. So we're not, nobody here is happy about spending money on Pier 40. We wish we were in a different position. And you can certainly say no, and with understanding the potential.
I understand you're considering it a safety issue, and I don't want to jeopardize anybody.
Okay.
And Larry, just to say, Madeline and I have had this conversation on many different occasions. I could not agree with you more, but I'm convinced we need to do this. So it just
Okay.
stinks, quite frankly.
Yeah, I remember yelling about this so many years ago when that, you know, it stinks. You're right.
It is unbelievably galling. Anyway, anybody else?
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to approve the budget? Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. Good job, Dan. And
Seconder, I want to thank Seconder
yes, thanks, Seconder.
and Dan for the
Yeah.
late night going over this over and over and over again.
Yeah. Okay, on to the next. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract with Cambridge 7 Associates Architects PC for aquarium exhibit design services for the Hudson River Park Estuarium. Madeline.
Thank you. Plans for Hudson River Park have long featured an estuarium. The estuarium will be located on the upland adjacent to the 6. The project is in the preliminary stages for plans. And full funding is still currently being sought. And the aquarium exhibits are foundational to the plans for the estuarium and have to be their information that we need in order to plan the building. So the trust has initiated the first phase of planning for the aquarium exhibits and therefore seeks the service of a qualified design firm to advance this effort. The trust issued a request for proposals for the aquarium exhibit design services on November 27th, 2019. Sorry, and received 3 proposals on the deadline. A selection committee comprised of trust staff reviewed the submissions and determined that Cambridge 7 Associates Architect was the top ranked consultant based on the scoring criteria provided in the RFP. Cambridge 7 has extensive experience designing aquaria and related exhibits at small and large scale at multiple budget levels. After interviewing Cambridge 7, the trust negotiated a fee reduction from the initial proposal of approximately $85,000, bringing their cost proposal to $298,097. Based on the foregoing, the trust seeks board authorization to contract with Cambridge 7 for the aquarium exhibit design services for the Hudson River Park Estuarium for an amount not to exceed $298,097 plus 10% contingency for a total board authorized amount of $327,907. Partial funding for this contract is available from a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation grant with the balance from the trust's reserve budget. Any questions? No?
Nope. Okay.
Chair?
Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the contract with Cambridge 7 Associates?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion's approved. Thank you. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract with WSP USA Buildings, Inc. for Pier 40 seismic engineering study. Madeline.
All right, as you all know, the trust issued a request for proposals for a Pier 40 seismic engineering study for the period of August 13th, 2019 through September 6, 2019, and received 7 proposals deadline. A selection committee comprised of trust staff reviewed the submissions and evaluated each firm according to the identified selection criteria in the RFP, and shortlisted and invited the top 5 firms for further interviews. Trust staff also requested a final and best offer from each shortlisted firm, with responses due November 8th, 2019. WSP USA Buildings was the top-ranked consultant based on the scoring criteria. Funding is available in the trust operating budget, and if the directors wish to proceed, the trust would need board authorization to contract with WSP for an amount not to exceed $781,800 plus a 10% contingency for a total board authorized amount up to $859,980. However, there has been some discussion from board members on this, and I would like directors to discuss this and confirm once again whether we should proceed with this engineering study, given the existing situation we find ourselves in with a significant decrease in expected revenue this year, as was previously discussed. So I would like to open it up and hear what you have to say. Somebody?
Say that we were discussing this before the virus, the same rationality, right? Like whether we should be doing this study for for something we don't even know is going to happen yet. I feel like it's gotten more tenuous. So I would think we probably now are
Now,
leaning
Pam,
before.
Pam, I think our rationale before I voted for it was because the thought was it would have to be done eventually no matter what. But in light of the new circumstances, I'm not sure that rationale is still applicable.
Can I hear from some other directors about any thoughts about this?
Madeline, this is Eric. How does it inform the Pier 40 76 task force? Is it explicit to any of the things in that, or is it just sort of a general study?
It doesn't inform the task force because this would not be able to be completed in time. But it would inform the trust in terms of future seismic, the soil conditions, the any potential for how we might attempt to address the seismic other than building cores, which we know we can do.
But does it allow you then? But does it allow you to get finer figures in terms of the proposals that are being put on the table of 40 and 76? Does it enable you to get better estimates?
It would enable us to inform an RFP with a little bit more detail, potentially, once we put out RFPs. So if we have this information, it could, might not, but it could be useful. And it would be useful knowing if it was useful information. But I'm not saying or suggesting that we never do this. The question is, do we want to do this now? That is the question.
As opposed to waiting a couple months or tabling it for this year? I mean, what are you thinking there, Madeline?
Well, I mean, there is a question whether or not, whether there'll be, if there's legislation this June, if the distraction of the virus is not too much, that and the recession that we're going through, that we can still get legislation in June, then that might be useful. But if we don't, then there's potentially not a
Okay.
need to do this so quickly.
So my view is, I continue to believe that this is important information from the standpoint of the trust, properly and fully evaluating what, you could argue Pier 40 being even more important to our future than ever before, given this financial crisis. But I could also, I'm also compelled to agree that, we're looking into a black hole right now. Hopefully we'll have better visibility in 2 or 3 months from now, and 2 or 3 months of waiting to engage with these consultants is not going to change the long-term prospects for Pier 40. So I'd suggest perhaps to table it for a couple months.
Yeah, Madeline, remind me how long this study takes?
About 6 months.
Yeah, okay. So putting it off isn't the worst thing we could do.
A couple months.
Douglas, do you have an opinion on this?
I agree, we can postpone it for a couple of months.
As do I as well.
Anybody think we should go ahead now?
I don't. I also wondered if some of these regulations wouldn't change too.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to start again. They change underneath our feet already in the past, 10 years.
anybody? else?
So as long as you're okay, I think we'll continue to try to hold this price. If we can, I will consider when this, how long we can keep this RFP considered fresh, and we'll revisit this again.
Maybe even get a better price.
Right, exactly.
Changing.
Yeah,
All right.
okay. Thank you. Okay, the next item before the board is a request for ratification of and authorization to contract with Carrier Communications, Inc. for Phase 7 Park-wide Security Camera Expansion Project. Madeline?
Thank you. Previously, the trust installed security cameras within and around Pier 40, in the Tribeca and Greenwich Village sections of the park, and in the area between Chelsea Piers and Pier 84. Those cameras are actively monitored by the trust contracted PEP officers and are used to record and document incidents that may occur. The trust has identified Clinton Cove, Chelsea Waterside Park, and Pier 25 Golf Building as locations that are in need of proactive camera monitoring. Sorry. The trust has also identified existing cameras at Pier 40 that have exceeded their expected lifespan, are in the need of replacement. In addition, new camera installations will be necessary at Pier 26 when that section of the park opens to the public later this year. The trust has purchased the security cameras and installation services from Carrier Communications for the earlier phases of the work and has been very satisfied with the services provided. Carrier Communications is a contractor under the list of OGS centralized contracts, and thus the trust does not need to undertake a competitive procurement process to contract with it for the additional work. Funding for this contract is through the trust operating budget as an equipment purchase. To the extent possible, the trust will seek funding support from the City of New York. At this time, the trust seeks ratification by the board for the purchase of the security cameras and related equipment from Carrier Communications at a cost of about $165,433 via an issued purchase order and authority by the board to enter a contract with Carrier Communications for the purchase of the remaining balance of equipment and installation services at a cost of $188,744, plus an additional $25,000 contingency for other services or purchases that may be necessary for a total board amount of up to $380,000. Any questions?
Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the Carrier Communications contract?
So moved.
Thanks. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Great, thank you. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to amend contract with New York Asphalt, Inc. for asphalt pavement repairs and on-call paving. Madeline?
Thank you. Following a competitive procurement process at its January 31st, 2019 meeting, the board authorized the trust to enter into a contract with HHJR Construction, Inc. for park-wide asphalt pavement repairs and on-call paving services for a 3-year term in an amount of $547,264. In order sorry, to expedite the completion of a number of paving projects throughout the park, trust staff elected to also award a second contract to the second highest scoring contractor in the process, New York Asphalt, Inc. New York Asphalt was awarded a 1-year contract in the amount of $189,623, and that expires on March 31st, 2020. New York Asphalt successfully performed paving services for the promenade area at Pier 84 and Pier 83 Plaza driveway. The trust has now identified a need for additional work to commence in the near future at Pier 40 and recommends using New York Asphalt Company. Funding for this contract amendment is available in the trust operating and capital maintenance budget. Trust seeks board authorization to amend the contract with New York Asphalt for park-wide asphalt pavement repairs and on-call paving services for an additional 2-year term and increase the amount by $200,000 for a total board authorization for a contract up to $389,623. Any questions?
Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the contract with, or the amendment of contract with New York Asphalt?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract for Pier 40 facade restoration. Madeline?
Thank you. Although restoration of the facade of the Pier 40 building is required to ensure public safety, it turns out that we will have to rebid this work and reduce the number of items included in the scope. So we are going to take this off the agenda, and we will be back to the board in May to revisit this item.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next item before the board is a request for authorization to contract for Pier 40 roof reconstruction project phase 4.
All right, your favorite subject. So, you know, the Pier 40 roof has undergone repairs for phases 1, 2, and 3 on the north and west sides of the building. At the time we performed these repairs, probably around 6 years ago, the board asked us not to proceed with phases 4 and 5. We've continued the services of EDG Engineering to continue the monitoring the condition of the roof annually. Several months ago, we notified you that EDG sent us a letter, which we sent, Dan sent again this morning to you. And the letter stated the critical need to proceed with phase 4 within the next year and warned that the portions of the underlying structure are compromised and in immediate need of repair. If it doesn't get repaired this year, the fear is that it will not be a repair anymore and a replacement. and that will be far more costly. So the trust staff now seeks board approval to enter into a contract for the Phase 4 roof repair work with a contractor to be selected pursuant to a request of proposals that was released on February 4th through March 20th, and in which the trust received 5 proposals by the submission deadline. The trust has determined that the work, which includes removal of deteriorated and damaged roofing materials, repairs to precast concrete planks, roof waterproofing for surface parking, waterproofing for the reinstall, and waterproofing of bulkhead structure roofs, is valued at approximately $12 million. After selection of a contract, trust staff will seek ratification of the contract at the board's May meeting. We think we can start this work before that and would like to do so. Funding for this contract is available from the trust capital maintenance budget, with funding provided through air rights sale proceeds and capital funds allocated for Pier 40 infrastructure repair by the City of New York. The trust requests authorization by the Board of Directors to contract for the Pier 40 roof reconstruction Phase 4 project for an amount not to exceed $12 million plus a 10% contingency, for a total board authorized amount of $13,200,000. This piece of roof goes from, it's on the southwestern shed. It's from the pretty much the western portion and goes east, covering the passive recreation field that was closed down a few years ago. So that's the section that we're talking about now. Any questions?
Well, if repair costs 12 million, what does replacement cost?
I haven't
mean-
figured that out, Pam, but instead of repairing the concrete, we'd have to replace it all. So you can just imagine how much that could cost.
Well, I actually kind of can't. That's why it's sort of boggling my mind that I was thinking for 12 million bucks, we could, we could buy a field. I don't know. I'm trying not to make fun of it, but it just seems it's mind-boggling, and the numbers have gotten exponential from when we've done other corners of the roof, right?
Actually, this fits into the budget. I think the numbers are what we thought they would be on this one. And
How many, I'm sorry, how many opinions have we gotten as to the repair? How many engineers have we gotten?
We've had a roofing engineer for many years. We like this roofing engineer. We find that they do very good work. I'm not clear that we need other roofing engineers to validate the work. We have a lot of construction.
It's a lot of money.
Yes, it's a lot of money. Look, none of us recommend this lightly, but literally the pillars in this section are moving, and that is definitely not a good sign. They're actually shifting. So this is serious, and we could ignore it, and we could wait for it to collapse, but we don't recommend that. It's up to you. If you don't want to do it, we won't do it. But we do believe it's a safety issue, and it's your choice. You have the staff's recommendation.
I think the question was, what would it cost to reconstruct it as opposed to actually repair it? And what's the difference between the two? I mean, what do we get from the repair and what do we get from the construction, and what are the two costs? And how
Well,
long do they last?
Kevin, are you on the phone?
Yes, I'm on. I can answer
Okay.
that.
I'll turn it over to Kevin, but I think the result is going to be basically the same. It's just a matter of if you let it degrade further, then you have to replace it. But Kevin, why don't you speak to this?
So
And
the
also,
roof is made
Kevin,
up of
Kevin, maybe-
precast planks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Kevin, you also may want to say how many bids came back to respond to Larry's question, because we have gotten a number of prices on this, if I'm not
Okay,
mistaken.
I'll start with that. There were 5 bidders. They range from 8.8 million to 24 million. We established the $12 million budget because it happened at a natural break. We had one bid at 8.8, 2 bids at about 11.5 to 11.8, and then the other 2 were 21 to 24 million. The bid that was 11.8 million is a contractor we're familiar with. He's worked on the building before. He has a pretty good grip on it. He's worked on the roof in particular before, so we were confident with that. The roof itself, the way it's constructed is there are precast concrete planks that span from beam to beam. And then on top of those precast concrete planks is a topping slab, which is actually the wearing surface that cars park on. Those concrete planks, because the membrane between the wearing surface and the concrete planks has failed, water is getting in between and it's rusting out the rebar that are in the concrete planks. And when the metal rusts, it expands and it blows off chunks of the concrete. And so for that reason, we haven't been parking cars in that section of the area either, because the concrete can come loose and fall down on the cars or on people. So it's structurally compromised from below because we're worried about debris falling, and it's structurally compromised on top because it's just not as strong. So the repair, what that will do is replace a few of the concrete planks and patch many more of them to make them their original strength. And it will remove the topping slab, and it will remove the waterproofing membrane, put a new membrane down, put a new wearing surface on top, which we will then be allowed to park cars underneath and on top, and rebuild the passive synthetic turf that sits on top of it as well. And it's a huge amount of
Effectively do a new roof, right?
Well, we're keeping all the precast concrete planks, which are a huge number of them. So we're only replacing a few of them in this contract, and we're repairing the vast majority of them. If we don't do this, the water will continue to permeate everything. And this is the concrete, the engineer's concern is we'll have far more failed concrete planks.
By the way, so the one piece of bright news in this, just to remind you, is that when this is done, we will be able to park 500 more cars. So we will be getting additional revenue until there's any redevelopment of Pier 40. So even in the next 5 years, I think we had done the numbers and given this to you previously. But I think it was, Dan, remind me, what was the additional revenue a year?
I think it's about $2 million.
$2.5 to $3 million.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Annual.
So in fact, in 5 years, we will potentially see back the money we put into the project.
And we think the market is there for that many more cars?
Yes.
And we're comfortable with spending 1/10 of the pile budget on the roof?
This money would come, so there is a freeze this week in city capital for non-emergency projects. We consider this an emergency project. The intent was to take the remainder of funds that are available, which is about 10 million from the city budget of that we had for Pier 40 repairs. And then the rest of it would come from the air rights sale or the money from Leroy Street. So we do have the money for this in out of all 3 of those Pier 40 budgets. This is one of the projects that we budgeted out of the $119.5 million that we have.
And what's the lifespan of the work? How long is it expected to last?
20 years, easily.
Yeah, I should say there's no real cost, there's no real cost savings of doing a 10-year roof or once you're doing a substantial repair, you really want to buy a 20-year roof. So there's not that much of a savings by downgrading this. This is sort of the minimum that has to be done to have a decent roof.
And what would be the lifespan of a new roof?
It's the same thing.
It's the same.
It's not that we're buying it's just that we're repairing it before we have to replace
Got it.
the concrete pavers, but the result will be the same.
We're getting closer and closer to just preserving Pier 40 in its state.
Yep. Anybody else?
So again, 500 cars for now until there's a redevelopment, which is not something that
Madeline?
is absolute at this moment. And we have a roof that needs to be repaired immediately.
Okay, anybody else? Are you ready to take a vote?
Do we have to?
Unfortunately, yes. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Call the motion. Let's go.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I know that was
Okay.
painful, but thank you.
Yeah, it's totally painful. Okay, the next item before the board is a request for authorization to increase funding to Hunter Roberts Construction Groups, LLC's Parkwide Construction Management Services Retainer Agreement.
Thank
Madeline.
you. At the July 24th, 2019 meeting, the board authorized trust staff to enter into 3-year retainer agreements totaling $100,000 with Armand Corporation and Hunter Roberts to serve Hunter construction managers for anticipated construction and capital maintenance repair projects, with the understanding that the additional amounts could be authorized as more work was assigned. Subsequent to the board meeting, the anticipated construction management work was divided between the two firms, such that Hunter Roberts was to manage Pier 40 projects, including facade restoration and office renovations, as well as the Pier 54 arch restoration. At its January 23rd, 2020 meeting, the board authorized an amendment to the Hunter Roberts contract for up to an additional $1.425 million to cover additional work assignments at Pier 40, including the courtyard field reconstruction, which is complete, and the roof reconstruction. Since the January board meeting, Hunter Roberts has been assigned additional work, including off-hour supervising of Pier 40 pile restoration night work in order to accelerate the pace of the pile repair work, which is now halted due to construction, and preliminary estimating and planning work related to the governor's request for the trust to provide any legislative recommendations required to achieve public open space and revenue goals for Pier 40 and 76 to the governor by May 1st. Hunter Roberts will perform this additional work consistent with its current hourly rates that the trust found was fair and reasonable when first evaluating the Hunter Roberts proposed center. There's a concert going on. Funding for the additional park-wide construction management services is available through the operating capital maintenance portion of the trust budget. The source of the funding for the Pier 40 pile component work are anticipated from the air rights proceeds. The trust requests authorization by the board of directors to increase the funding for an additional $300,000 for a total board authorization of up to $2.1 million for Hunter Roberts Parkwide Construction Management Services Retainer Agreement. Any questions? Okay. There.
Anybody have anything? If not, do I have a motion to approve the 100 Roberts construction project? Management service retainer.
Yes, so moved.
Thank you. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Great, motion carries. Okay, thank you. That completes the board action items for approval today. And now I would like to ask Ms. Wills to present the president's report. Thank you.
Thank you. As the directors are aware, for the past 3 weeks, trust execs and staff have been working very long hours to address the coronavirus pandemic that unexpectedly changed all of our lives. Our initial efforts involved adding more cleaning services in all of our facilities throughout the park, following the recommendations of the New York State and New York City Departments of Health. We're very pleased at the dedication our staff has shown throughout this crisis, and we are grateful to all of them. We also thank FedCap and the Doe Fund and provide the necessary cleaning services essential at this time. Trust executives have also been participating on daily calls with the city and state and has been provided updates as both continue to respond to the crisis. When we learned that the governor would be issuing a series of executive orders to reduce the number of people working in the state, and of course at our Pier 40 office, the Trust IT department spent many hours obtaining additional Citrix licenses so that more staff could work at home, along with other licenses for video conferencing such as Zoom and WebEx. IT has been assisting staff helping them to adjust to working at home. And today we've had our first test case of holding a virtual board meeting, and I appreciate the director's patience as we ourselves learn how to run meetings with no one actually in the Pier 40 office. Our operations and facilities employees are doing a terrific job and responding very quickly to additional closings of facilities in the parks, such as the basketball courts, dog runs, playgrounds that began over 2 weeks ago through last week. I really want to say how appreciative I am of the tremendous dedication that Deb Kuska, Bill Reddick, Alex Mezzatesta, and all their staff showed, and our PEP officers who are working on very short notice to address all the ongoing changes needed in the park that seem to change daily as more governmental mandates get issued, and we continue to interpret them. Dennis McCartney. Dennis, are you on the phone? Dennis McCartney, our new Senior Director of Public Safety, most recently a lieutenant with New York's finest, started March 1st at the Trust and has been a great asset to us as we deal with this health crisis. And I hope that all the directors can meet him soon. In addition, PEP and NYPD have been monitoring the park to encourage the separation of park patrons. As you know, with so many people at home, there's been a surge in local residents using the park for exercise and to enjoy the beautiful early spring days. We've produced scores of signs encouraging social distancing, but this has proved quite challenging since at the end of the day, it's really up to the individuals to remain vigilant to help reduce the rate of transmission and be responsible for their individual actions. And unfortunately, we're seeing people in the southern end of the park below 14th Street not complying with physical distancing, but we're doing our best to encourage it. We are one of the top 5 parks, I understand, that's having difficulty with crowds on nice days. And we're doing our best to deal with that. I wish to thank Dan, Noreen, and Chris for continuing to be there every day, and all the other Trust employees that are still coming to Pier 40 and the park to provide essential services, as the Trust has kept a skeleton crew in place to continue to provide cleaning and maintenance services and some horticulture. In summation, I really want all the directors to just how proud I am of the Hudson River Park Trust staff and their commitment to serving the public and how responsive and resilient everyone has been during these very challenging times. And I cannot express how appreciative I am to be working with so many dedicated colleagues. I wish to thank Sikander and Dan for the work in preparing the budget that we discussed earlier, including the more recent efforts to forecast reductions in revenue expected, even though we live in uncertain times and do not know how long these closures will last. I believe, we've done our best to be conservative and to be able to outlive these closures. And now I'd like to provide some detail about the increase in the general liability premium that we expected and did occur again this year. Effective February 28th, 2020, the premium for the trust $100 million general liability and umbrella insurance coverage and property insurance increased by 17.8% from last year's premium. The trust insurance broker Cool Insuring Agency reached out to 38 carriers, many of which did not provide a quote. The final pricing for a one-year period is over $3.93 million, which includes the OGS 5% administrative fee, and that is up from $3.34 million last year. The primary coverage and first $3 million of excess rose only modestly, about 4%. The next layer of excess, $10 million, rose over 48% from last year. We understand that this premium for general liability across the nation has increased substantially this past year, and Cool and OGS were not surprised by the 17.8% increase for the trust. Other factors that account for the large premium increase include the amount of projected construction in the park, risks due to park operations, and it being an anomaly, the New York City venue, terrorism concerns, construction exposures, and the trust claim history. I note that the trust only had 6 claims this past year and 6 the prior year compared to the 52 claims that occurred in the 2017 to 18 policy period, largely due to the terrorism attack on the bikeway. However, the carriers tend to review a full 3-year period when deciding whether to provide a quote. Trust staff, board member Tom Pagase, OGS and Cool had a conference call to discuss the increase in insurance costs this past February. In order to be able to plan better for our annual budget requests to the state, I had asked if we could procure insurance for a 9-month period so that it ends closer to the calendar year. That way we have enough time to ask the state for an adjustment in our next year budget, in our next budget year. It worked out fine this year because we projected a higher number. We had a difficult time the year before because of the timing of when we got our quotes. So per the recommendations made on the call, the trust has now procured the general liability insurance policy for a 9-month period through December 1st, 2020, as opposed to the usual policy term that ends February 28th of each year. However, for this year, we should expect that in December, we may see another increase in the premiums, and thus we've left some cushion in the budget for this last quarter contingency. Any questions? Tom, you have any additions?
No, other than that, we're in a hard market as far as insurance. Insurance premiums are up, 15 to 20% across the board, not just general liability, but everything. Everyone's getting hit across the board. So it's just that time where insurance companies want their pound of flesh, and it just so happens to occur in a major crisis. It is what it is. For almost over a decade, even possibly even longer, we were in a soft market, and insurance premiums outside of a park risk profile were renewing at flat, and of course with the park's risk management profile in terms of, like, as you mentioned, terrorism claims, the increased construction. This all led into these increased premiums. We had very heated and debated conversations with the broker, and they actually did a really good job in reaching out to so many different insurance companies, and this was just the best that they can do. The great thing about it is that, you know, we get reimbursed. But it is a cash. As Madeline mentioned, we put together a 9-month policy to sort of help with cash flow, but unfortunately, it is what the market is.
Thank you, Tom. Any other thoughts on this?
Thanks, Madeline. Thank you. There's nothing else
Okay,
for,
yeah, I actually, I
ahead.
do have more, sorry. At the January meeting, I reported that the governor had tasked the trust with leading a holistic conversation about the park and the roles that Pier 40 and 76 can play in it, both with respect to increased public open space and the contributions to the park's overall care into the future. The trust is further directed to provide formal recommendations on any legislation necessary to achieve these goals by May, and has also been told to provide preliminary recommendations to the governor's staff by April 1st. To accomplish these goals, the trust reached out to the community boards, 1, 2, and 4, elected officials, the advisory council, friends, and formed a task force which has met 5 times. Although the trust was prepared and the final presentation was sent out to all task force members, due to the health crisis, the meeting that was to have happened remotely this past Friday was canceled. The staff has been working with several consultants to prepare visual and financial studies to inform our planning. Lisa Swifkin and her team from James Corner Field Operations, the landscape designer for the Gansport section of the park, HRNA led by Carl Weisbrod and Christina Pecorelli, Arup Engineers and Hunter Roberts Construction have helped identify physical conditions and other factors that will inform opportunities at both piers. Among these is that future open space and infrastructure costs at Pier 76 will far exceed those at Pier 40, even though Pier 76 is approximately 1/3 the size. This is because prior air rights sales at Pier 40 have been used to repair the steel pile and pier deck, lessening the burden on a potential future developer. Field operations is also helping participants understand how buildings at both piers could be planned to increase the amount of public open space. HRNA, supported by a huge amount of work from Dan, has prepared materials that demonstrate the projected funding gap that the park faces in the future due to the continuing need for park-wide capital maintenance. The trust estimates needing about $15 million in new annual operating revenues by 2029 to fund ongoing capital maintenance and to retain a reserve to protect the park against lost income or unexpected damages such as those that are occurring today amidst this coronavirus crisis. To fill this gap, projected future revenue needs require an estimated $12.5 million in ground rent from Pier 40 and $6 million from Pier 76, or $15.6 million and $7.5 million in $2029, assuming the gap is filled entirely through redevelopment. Among the conversation topics at the task force is considering the beneficial effects of additional sources of revenue from sources or methods beyond redeveloping Pier 40 and 76 could have on both piers. By reducing the amount of ground rent that could be required, the amount of development at Pier 40 could be reduced, while at Pier 76, increased revenue could partially offset the higher costs of the pier infrastructure. When the task force next meets, we will discuss such ideas as collecting parking taxes, sales taxes on commercial day cruise tickets, and commercial rent taxes generated within the park, and possibly extending the boundaries for air right capture sites up to 2 blocks inland instead of the 1 block currently allowed as potential ways to achieve this. Clearly, we are all aware that the state and the city are facing extraordinary financial challenges at this time, and that any legislative proposals we may suggest would have to be considered in that context. If any of the ideas would be considered favorably, we imagine that any legislation would take into consideration the fact that any of these additional subsidies could be implemented at a future date, triggered potentially 3, 4, 5 years later. Aside from these ideas, other potential legislative changes that have been raised by the trust within the task force are allowing office use at both piers as a permissible use is currently allowed at Pier 57, extending the lease term for Pier 40 up to 99 years, consistent with the other park commercial piers in the park, and allowing for construction beyond the footprint of Pier 76 as it existed in 1998 with the purpose of increasing amount of passive active open space. Similarly, it may be beneficial to allow for construction of the commercial use east of the bulkhead of Pier 76, provided again that doing so results in more open space on the pier. We should note that while these ideas have been discussed, there'll be need to further discuss this, and there is not consensus on these ideas at this time. Since many board members have also been participants in the task force, I'd certainly like you to weigh in with any thoughts you have or any comments and observations. So many of you have participated. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I thought that it was a really well done process. Are you guys getting an echo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My sound was, okay, now it should be better. I couldn't hear properly on my computer. I had the phone going. I thought that Lisa's analysis and the HRNA analysis really laid out very clearly to looked at and presented all of the options. And I thought we were getting somewhere actually, particularly, I mean, clearly with board 4, less so, I think with board 2, but even board 2 was coming around to sort of acknowledging that just saying reconstruct the pier as is was perhaps not the most viable option.
Anybody else have anything?
I think the presentations have been incredible, and I'm always game to sit through that stuff again. And this, I mean, the work that Carl's group has done is visually so insightful, and Lisa, of course, is great. But I do kind of feel like we've been here before a couple times in things that you guys have done before. The trust staff has done it before. So I don't feel like there were any breakthrough moments. Of course, we were interrupted by the virus, but I don't know where it's going to go. Frankly, I can't take a guess because I feel like we've done other things like this to try to move the community along too. But it hasn't. I don't think it's been a waste of time. I just don't really know where we go from here on that.
I don't think it's been a waste of time. And I do think there has been I may be wrong. I've been wrong before, but I feel like there's been some kind of movement towards a consensus, and it's moved the whole process along. I think it's been beneficial.
Well, hopefully we will be able to reconvene the group in the not too distant future, and then continue having conversations with the state, in particular, the state and the city, but in particular the state, as soon as the budget is passed. Is anybody else?
Yeah, Madeline, this is Eric, and I would say yes. I think the presentations have been great. As a new board member, it's been great for me to get up to speed on everything. And obviously COVID has upended everything, but I think you're in a good position to continue that dialogue and hopefully make some progress once this all starts to souse out a little bit.
Okay, it's great to hear from you. We've spent, as you well know, a huge amount of time on these presentations, and I do think that they are quite constructive, and that both field operations and HRNA have done a great job in being able to articulate them in ways that haven't, depict this in charts and ways that I think that have been helpful. So I remain, as I always do, optimistic that we will somehow get somewhere here. I also want to say that there are conversations going on. If you, for those of you who may have known, the governor had put into his proposed budget language about Pier 76, that the state had to leave, the city had to leave, the tow pound had to leave before the end of 2020. And that if they didn't, they would have to pay the trust $12 million and $3 million monthly after that. There has been continued conversation over this last week, much of which I have not been involved in, but know about, that, and I am not quite sure what's going to happen to this before the budget's passed within the next day or so, whether this language is going to remain in, whether it's going to be adjusted, and whether there's going to be able to be agreement from the legislature on new language. I will let you know what happens as soon as as soon as I know.
Great, thank you.
I still have a couple of more things. Sorry, but I'm almost done. Pier 26 construction was proceeding on schedule until the construction halt imposed by executive order this past Friday. We may revisit this one, but for now they have stopped work. TrevCon construction completed installation of the ecological get down, the cantilever walkway structure. Stephen Dubner Landscaping and EJ Electric continued to install wood decking.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, lighting and custom railings. Portions of the north wall were delivered by Landscape Forms, and they're currently being installed. Landscape Forms is in Michigan, and they had a stop work from the state of Michigan. So that's a little bit on hold. Depending on how long our stop work order is in place, we're still hopeful that this project will be completed this summer. We were actually ahead of schedule. So depending upon what happens here, I'm still optimistic that we can open sometime this summer. James Corner Field Operations has completed design development documents at Gansevoort Peninsula, and these are under the trust. We're currently coordinating with various utilities, agencies, and regulatory authorities to further refine the design as needed. On March 16th, the Public Design Commission granted conditional preliminary approval to 97 park and canopy designs. Melk Landscape Architecture and Urban Design will continue to refine their design and develop details, working towards an April 13th submission of the 100% design development package. At the same time, both Melk and our independent construction manager, Gil Bain, have been preparing independent cost estimates for the 60% design package that was submitted to the trust. Information from these estimates will inform the design as it progresses. On a separate note, Tashika Mori Architects has been on a fast track to finish their design concept for the comfort maintenance station. This process resulted in a design that was submitted to the Public Design Commissioner on March 20th for preliminary review. Because of the fast track, we had been under a timeline so that this would not hold up the project. And we did not yet share this with the design committee, but Kevin, you're on the phone, and we'll make sure that a package is sent out this week to the design committee so that they can see what this concept looks like. Any questions about any of the projects? All right, the trust has provided the directors with the financials for the first 11 months of 1920. Total operating revenues were 34.6 million and operating expenses are 23.5 million. We did not provide you with PEP statistics, a list of FEMA reimbursements or contracts between $100,000 and $200,000 for this meeting, given the urgent issues of the past few weeks, including transitioning to working remotely. But we'll make sure you get all this for the May meeting. And are there any questions before I turn the meeting to back to the chair and then to Bob Townley? Anything else that you'd like to discuss?
Nope.
Thank you, Madeline. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for all the great work. In spite of the fact that we have this crisis going on, there's still a ton of stuff to do. And thank you, you and your staff.
Thank you.
With that, I would like to ask Bob Townley to give his report. Bob, are you there?
Yep, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So this is my last report as chair. We have a rotating way of doing these things. I think this is the 4th time I'm leaving the chair. That's about 16 years. We did not have a meeting because it was canceled. So you do have the attendance sheets and you do have what we've been working on. I could just tell you that I will still stay very, very involved. I think the work that the park is going to do, and as an advocate for the park, I plan on making sure that I can be helpful in that. I want to say one thing, Madeline, it's good to hear your voice. And I haven't spoken to you since, since this all started. We've been through September 11th. This is very different. Madeline was the chair of the community board. I now have a 900-person staff with 7,000 kids that rely upon Manhattan Youth, and it's challenging. But one thing I learned is that things don't look today what they're going to look like in 2 months. And so you got to take it easy. You got to make sure you don't jump to any conclusions, and you just got to stay healthy. And it's a war out there, folks. Unless people know it, don't go outside. One of my very good friends, a restaurateur, Madeline knows him, passed away yesterday. Tribeca Kitchen. He's been running it for years, and I just tell you that because it can get you, and you want to be really, really careful out there. And it's not over yet. Jeffrey LaFrancois will be taking my place. He's right here. And he is a wonderful advocate for the park. I look forward to working with Jeffrey and everybody on the task force and on the advisory council in the next years. I'm not going anywhere, I hope. And I think, and Madam Chair, I thank you for your work over the years. I know you've been busy, and you know, I don't think you're done. I do not think you are done, and I don't think our former administration is done. It's when we need it the most. And Jeffrey, I mean, if you want to say anything, or
just a hello. I'm excited to be involved with the Advisory Council as part of Community Board 4. I am at home, as I think all of us are, and my view out the window right now is 11th Avenue and then Clinton Cove. And just to the south of that is Pier 90, where I watched the United States Navy's Comfort ship arrive today. So constantly reminded of that, but super excited to be working still with Bob and everybody else. So glad to be here. Thank you.
And I just got to give one shout out to all the staff that I work with at the Trust, but I got to give a shout out to Bill Reddick. He's done a few things that I know of that we've worked on in the last 10 days, and I just want Bill, you stay healthy. You know, he's really just top of the line, and maybe I'll steal him from you guys.
Don't even try.
Bob, and no stealing allowed.
Nice try.
I can't.
Thank you. I just
He
want
won't leave. He won't leave you. He won't leave you. And Dan, everybody, good to see Dan and Larry and everybody. It's good to see everybody. Pam, I spoke to him.
So Bob, thanks for that accolade. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You just take care of yourself. All right.
I am.
Okay.
Great. Well, Jeffrey, welcome to our happy band.
Thank you.
Look forward to working with you. And
Likewise.
Bob, thank you for all the
My
work
pleasure.
you put into this.
My honor.
It's been great working with you over the years, and you're not going anywhere.
No, I'm not going. No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have Connie. Connie, are you there? Do you have anything you want to talk about?
I am. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can.
So it's nice to see most people. Sorry, I don't have the video on. We have a bandwidth war going on in my house. Everybody at the same time working and multiple video conferencing. So the audio seemed like the best solution for now. So all of Friends events are canceled through the end of May. We expect to be extending that to the end of June. We have our regular spring membership campaign beginning in April, which is a online and mail campaign. So that will go forward, but it is really only a fraction of the fundraising that we would normally be doing at this time of year. We're looking into the new programs for small business loans that are part of the Federal CARES Act that was just passed. They're available through the SBA, mostly through third-party administrators. We have an appointment tomorrow morning with a loan officer from the Nonprofit Financing Fund, who is one of the administrators, and our auditor has recommended as easy to work with. We're already exploring our eligibility with them. There is a separate SBA program that is a payroll loan program, and we're going to be filing an application for that one as well. We've frozen all hiring, all raises, and all promotions until probably at least mid-year to see how things shake out. We're also part of a citywide consortium of parks, conservancies, and friends organizations that is currently lobbying the city for extra funds in the July budget, stressing the outsized role that parks have been playing during this crisis and the importance of physical and mental health benefits to New Yorkers that are being provided. We're concentrating on contacting our current donors and Friends members to check in on how they're doing and increase our communications during this time of relative social isolation for people. They're very eager to engage. Hopefully this will turn into some additional fundraising benefits later on. And our playground committee, which had to cancel its 700-person barbecue, is looking into either a virtual fundraising event or virtual barbecue event of some kind to try and replace some of the funds that they would usually be bringing in. We're also speaking to our foundation contacts and our current grantors to try and get them to allow us to turn current funding that was originally intended for programming into general operating support to help us through the next 3 months, which will be the most difficult of these times, I suspect, depending on what the ultimate rules are when they're lessened about gatherings. The gathering issue, it's not just the 1,000-person gala or the 700 barbecue, it's literally the 30-person corporate volunteer event and just about everything else we do, including, you know, literally meeting one-on-one with donors, because at this point, there are no meetings, there are no gatherings, there are no programs, and it's really, you know, for not just us, but all small nonprofits, going to be a very, very tough year. There are a couple of city and New York Community Press funds that have opened recently. Right now they're focusing on arts and culture educations, and we haven't discovered one that is yet focusing on open space organizations, but that was part of the purpose of getting together these 17 groups that we have in this larger Park Conservancy communication that we're going to be sending out. We have canceled all of our non-essential contracts to save money. This includes both our lobbyist and our public relations firm. Our board executive committee, which was supposed to be meeting tomorrow to pass our new budget, has asked to put that meeting off for about 4 to 6 weeks until we get a better sense of where things are going to be in May and June, and how soon any of these restrictions are going to be lifted. We're also going to be waiting until after the end of the first quarter before we move forward with any plans for a gala in October. The board felt it was way too soon to be able to make that kind of a decision. In particular, it'll be very difficult to get an honoree this year, so we'll have to figure out what to do in case we do go forward with the gala, whether it will be the same format, something different, in hopes of getting people back. That gala is 3/5 of our annual revenue, so that's a really critical event for us to have. My sense is that if we are all allowed to roam free again by October, that people will be overwhelmingly supportive at that time, that everybody will be so relieved to be just getting out and allowed to congregate and feeling more comfortable. We're hoping to make up some of that revenue that way, whether it is simply, you know, a large cocktail by carousel party as opposed to a formal sit-down dinner, or something that needs to be arranged more quickly. You know, this is fortunately not a great story for Friends to have right now, but I know that we have lots and lots of companies citywide and we're all kind of in the same boat. So that is it. Sorry to be not so positive at this point, but you know, I think everybody understands, and you know, everything could change, like Bob says, in 60 days, and we could all be feeling much more confident.
From your lips to God's ears. Thank you, Connie. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay healthy, you guys.
Yeah, you too. Okay, any further business? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Next, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. This worked out really well, I think, for the first pass at it. So Madeline, thank you and your team for this, and everybody stay healthy. We're going to get through this, and we'll get through this by sticking together and working. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Noreen. Hi, Noreen.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you, Julie.
Talk soon. Stay in touch.
All righty.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye.
Bye.